bueno. What up? What up? Hello, everybody. Welcome to the South Star Classroom, formerly known as Common Grounds of Self-Determination. It's that time, everybody. It's Friday. It's a good day. Ice Cube was just telling me how good of a day he had. And Dr. Charles Cole, ladies and gentlemen, a real doctor, is here with us to tell us how great of a day he is having as well. Before we even swing into everything, South Star Classroom, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. on the Eastern board. You can check us out here on YouTube. We're going to have those podcasts up soon, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. And we're really excited for that. And as we always say, first and foremost, that while we love doing the show, we are a consulting firm. You can hire us for any kind of assistance in terms of school culture structures, operational structures, academic structures, parental involvement structures. These are things that we've all written about. Those articles are free for you to peruse on medium.com. But without further ado, I want to introduce our leader, the man, the real doctor, Dr. Charles Cole. Man, how has your week been?
It has been really blessed. I'm back home in California. I don't have an apartment here anymore, so I'm in this lovely Airbnb in gentrified West Oakland.
It looks good, man. Looks good.
Listen, man. It is definitely very different than when I was growing up here in West Oakland. There was a lot of black people in this area. I think I am the black person in this area today, but I was here yesterday, man. There's this new movie called Half Day. It's a short film. It's won some awards, and I got to premiere it. I got to be a moderator with the writer, director, and some of the stars. Yeah, we did it at LinkedIn. LinkedIn was a partner, Mentor California, and Chocolate Chip Media, and so I got to lead that. And hopefully it gets bought soon. Maybe you'll sit on HBO or the Hulus or Netflixes of the world. But that was really great. And then today I'm giving a talk right after our piece because my old math teacher is finally retiring, and he is and I don't know if he knows that I'm coming, so I will be giving his talk. He was my 7th and 8th grade algebra and geometry teacher, so that should be pretty fun. How you feel?
That's exciting, man. And what was this movie about?
So yes, thank you. Good question. The movie was super dope. The movie was about basically two black boys in the East Bay, Oakland area, and their stepbrothers. And it was only 15 minutes, but they're meeting kind of for like not the first time, but they're getting acquainted with each other. The son and his father, the older son and his father, things were a little bit different when he was coming up. The father remarried and she had a child, and this dad got his stuff together, and there's just some dynamics at play that impact our community a lot. And it's in 15 minutes, there's a lot of nuance there. It was really beautiful. And we just had an amazing conversation. We brought out a bunch of black boys from across the Bay Area and gave them a tour of the LinkedIn offices and facilities. And we watched this movie and had a Q&A, and it was beautiful. So when I get some footage of it, I will put it out there. But it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my career.
Wow, man, that's impressive. Congratulations. And you said that you were moderating the end. So you were handling a Q&A as well. What was it that you were offering the audience?
Yeah, so basically we had the writer director there. We had two of the stars from the movie there. And so basically they don't have a curriculum there yet. Maybe that's something that the South Star Classroom can actually take on. I'll talk to them about it. But we wanted to make sure that the nuances of it were actually being picked up, that people were understanding. And it was, like I said, man, it was just beautiful. It was. So we made sure that those young people got to ask questions and reflect. And also it was just cool for them to be in a room with like a writer director of a movie, right? Like, and there were people that got referenced. Like I think somebody mentioned one of their favorite movies, and the writer director is working with that same person on a different project. So it was really cool for these black kids to see men that look just like them living out their dreams and doing what they need to do, and also add some good into the world, man. So I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm not a big San Francisco guy, I'm an Oakland guy, but San Francisco was just beautiful yesterday. I mean, we had these kids on like the 14th, 15th floor of the LinkedIn building. They got to see the whole city. They got to see how people work in these places where you got like they got a cafeteria with all this amazing food and, like their own personal Starbucks that's linked in. And, these kids got to experience a world that they probably don't often get a chance to see. So it was great.
I think that's incredible. And I do think that the perspective building of young adults to see themselves in a place that they see other folks that look like them, speak like them, and came from backgrounds like them gives them an incredible sense of perspective and paradigm shift. It's really quite radical what can happen when you have that small shift of paradigm and that you're involved and you're invited and you see these people being extraordinarily successful. So shout out to you, Doc, because you were that guy. And Doc, you could have chosen to be the Morgan Freeman character from Lean On Me. You could have just walked around the LinkedIn offices yelling at them with a megaphone, being like, "Come on, Shirley, come on, you're late for class."
You could have. You smoke crack, don't you? You smoke crack, don't you?
Oh my God, man. that entire scene for that movie, I was like, I don't understand. Were educators like this in the 1980s? I am myself a superintendent. I've never followed a student.
I love that movie, man.
Berating them verbally, man.
I love that movie.
I almost want to do that with adults. Just find adults that really aren't doing well in El Paso or other places that are just making the world maybe not a greater place, and just really just verbally berating them like Morgan Freeman. Why are you littering here? Did you not see the trash can?
Listen, man, I love.
You think littering is okay? You'll get detention.
I know people don't like that movie now. They try to, oh, he was toxic, but I love that movie. But that brings us into our topic of the day. And one of the things that we're talking about is what Morgan Freeman's character was trying to get a lot of those young people to be able to do, which was, move on to college, like have a different type of life. And for a lot of us, and both you and I, did not come from the type of means where it was just simple enough that we had money saved up or our parents could pay for us to go to school. We had to take out loans. We had to get financial assistance, and a rising cost of education has been kind of dire and drastic. And, there's a lot of things that go into student loans, right? Like as somebody who has been bankrupt before, you can expunge almost every single debt except for student loans. And I'll just be very honest and transparent. I have loans that are well into the six figures. And I'll bring you in a second, but I want to lay out what we're talking about today. President Joe Biden.
Frame it up.
President Joe Biden's administration has been kind of toying around or playing around with the idea of potentially canceling debt. I think a lot of folks on the Democratic side are trying to rally troops and rally support for what they know and feel is going to be a midterm bloodbath. So one of the ways that they were thinking about reinvigorating the base, especially a Democratic base, was to cancel student debt. Now, don't get your hopes up. Even if that does happen, I don't think many of them meant all of your debt. I think there was I heard 30,000 floated, 20,000. Now I'm hearing 10,000 of it floated. The Republicans are working very, very hard to make sure that does not happen. But what we want to say to you all, and the conversation that we want to have, is student loans, to forgive them or to not forgive them. And I wanted to have this conversation, like I said, for one, you and I both have had student debt, and we have two very different stories about how that's playing out for us. And I think people need to know that and understand it. Two, it is not a given that everybody wants student loans forgiven. And it's not just a white Republican thing. I have people that I love and respect that are Black and brown that do not feel that student loans should be forgiven. And they have their reasons why. So I want to make sure that they are represented. And I'm going to be very honest and transparent. I absolutely want them forgiven. But let's just start out with you, regardless of what Biden's doing, regardless of what's in the ether, how do you feel about the concept of student loan forgiveness?
Yeah, before we get into that really quick, just shout out to the Beard of Knowledge, who's not with us today.
Oh, yes.
You may have noticed that David Castillo is not joining us today. He's living it up on the north side of California. So what I'm to understand is Oakland to Sacktown, the Bay Area, and back down. Cali is really where you all put your back down. And that's exactly what David's doing right now, is putting that back down in Northern California. We miss him. He'll be with us next week. And then ironically, I'll be gone next week. So it'll be a David and Charles show. I'll be attending Harvard graduation for the second time. Not my own. I graduated back in 2010, but the co-founder of the El Paso Leadership Academy, Andrew Benitez, who graduated from Harvard undergrad, is now getting his doctorate from Harvard. So I just want to quickly shout that out. And to our audience, I want the audience, you did such an incredible job of chiming in last time that we were here and had so much participation. So I'd love for you all to really chime in this time. If you've got student loans, if you've got sentiments about them, if you've got feelings about them, I'd love for you to chime in, because this, really like gives us that kind of conversational tone that we did last time. So here, I've got a lot of opinions on the student loan situation. First and foremost, clearly I'm with you. I think that many of them should be forgiven. There was an era in the US here where things precipitously changed. And I think it really hit the tail end of the Gen X kids and the front end of the Gen Y kids a whole lot. So that means you, Charles, that front end of the Gen Y, interestingly enough, you are a millennial, an exceptional one. So never let anyone say that the millennials don't have exceptional people. You are true.
I appreciate it.
And of course, man. And on the tail end of the Gen X, what wound up happening was that in the 1960s and the 1970s, the advent of both things like the GI Bill that then became something that the African American and Mexican population could now use, because it really wasn't something that could be used post-World War II, but was really coming into advent with the Civil Rights era, and the changes going on in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, led a lot of folks, our parents, the opportunity for the very first time to go to college. And the GI Bill helped out with that. But in addition to that, state schools still had extraordinarily reasonable tuition rates. And college entry was really something that the majority of the United States was getting into. So colleges wound up making their tuition rates rather reasonable. And what wound up happening was that despite the fact that your rich elite would consistently attend your, primarily Ivy League schools, because they went to the Ivy League feeder schools. These are your prep schools like Milton and Choate and Andover and Exeter. College at the state level was extraordinarily accessible. UT Austin, the UC system in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s grew to be the most exemplary state system, that's University of California, in the country. And if you look at the UC system today, UC Santa Barbara, San Diego, Davis, Berkeley, and UCLA are still ranked in top 50 colleges across the country. Berkeley being, I believe, still, along with Michigan, jostling for that 1 or 2 position for the best public school. UT Austin's up there too. So those facts basically stipulate that the college entry process for those folks was not only accessible, but somewhat affordable. And then there was a ton of help for that. What wound up happening was that with the ludicrous advent of those people going to college, then the college boom occurred. And that boom greatly affected the Generation X kids like myself and the new advent Generation Y kids. So now what's going on is that despite the fact that a lot of colleges, Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, the UCs, then started being like, hey, like, look around. Why is it that we don't have really qualified Black and brown kids in these schools? Now, for whatever people can say about affirmative action, I got to say that, like, the idea of looking towards qualified candidates of color to determine whether or not they're going to succeed in those colleges made a big difference. So you saw enormous growth in the Black and brown community in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s in places like Harvard, Stanford, UT, UC Berkeley, so on and so forth. With the rise in college admittance, and I think a very interesting economic shift in around 1992 with the economic boom that occurred, college tuition rates started skyrocketing precipitously. They were like, we can raise these rates because holy smokes, like, we should be charging this much. That is what precipitated this insane level of student loan situation. So kids that were getting into Columbia and Harvard and Stanford were basically being like, I got in. However, they were looking at tuition debts of anywhere from $25,000 to $45,000 to $50,000 a year. So you go to Stanford, Harvard, Columbia, those schools, like you're in Hawk for $200,000 for the 4 years. You go to a state school, they were still pretty reasonable, but those tuitions skyrocketed as well because the states stopped subsidizing them as well. So then these loan companies come in and they're like, we can make your dreams come true. We're going to get you to Stanford and Harvard and UT and UC Davis and all these wonderful places. And, you know, the interest rate is going to be extraordinarily low. You're not going to have to pay interest while you're in school, but you know, you can afford to go to this school and you're going to get a great job as a result of going to this college. And then boom, you'll be able to pay these debts off. So in a respect, there were a lot of people that got to go to a lot of places as a result of these loans they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. However, I don't know if these communities had, I would arguably say, a nuanced idea of finance and the enormity of debt that they were getting into, because it all looks good. You're riding this incredible wave of I got in. So now we've got these loans and we can afford it. And then are you making the pragmatic decision to then say, I don't know if we can afford this? Because straddling either my parents or me with $100,000 of debt seems to be a very like large stone / albatross. But you've got to understand, like, the parents may have not been in a situation where they truly understood the nuance of this. And we were kids. We're 17, 18 years old. And I think people would be like, you're a responsible adult at 18. And I would arguably say that neuroscience would say, I don't really think that any 18-year-old is even remotely responsible. In fact, the brain is still growing until you're age 25. You're not really able to make concrete decisions about consequences and so forth, especially when it comes to long-term life decisions until you're 25. And then to boot, you need the experience to live, so you're at 30. So what I'm getting at, Charles, is like, do you feel that you were in a position when you were going to college that you felt you had all the information, you were elevated enough, you were mature enough to understand the incredibly encumbering responsibility of that debt?
I mean, I actually don't have a problem paying back debts. You know, my mortgage, my car notes, any of those things. I think, you know, to answer your question around where I was at 18, 19, you know, I grew up in absolute poverty. I grew up like in shelters, being homeless. I lived in projects. I lived in public housing. I got food stamps and all of those things. And college was the thing that was sold to me as like the thing that would change my life. And to be very fair, it has. Like, I mean, people, it wasn't the college directly, but it was that trajectory has put me on a different path that was very different from my parents or whatnot. I think that there were some intricacies in there. I wasn't financially literate. I'm still learning how to be financially literate today. And I think that the ways in which student loans are structured, kind of against the consumer, is not advantageous to people. It's advantageous to banks and systems. And Sally Mae, who also does no longer does these. Like, Sally Mae has sold off all of those loans. My loans have been passed around like COVID. Like, I don't even know who owns my loans at the moment. And I was paying it. I you know, when things got tough, I did, you know, I asked for a break or did forbearance or whatnot. But tried to definitely stay on top of it. And then the Obama administration came in, and you know, there was like there were forgiveness programs that were sprouting up and income-based repayment. And but every year the interest on my loans, which was supposed to be very low, you know, once they get sold a few different times, somewhere in the shuffle, or once you refinance a few different times, somewhere in the shuffle, things start to shift. And even though I'm paying all this money, my number is just getting larger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I didn't go to a Harvard. I didn't go to a Stanford. I went to state schools. But here's the thing: I was going to do whatever I had to do in order to get this degree to live a different life. And so I do know, and this is where I want to be fair, because I absolutely want these loans forgiven. I actually think that it will spark our economy in a lot of ways, because I promise you I will spend more money. People listening, I will spend more money if I did not have loans. I'll go splurge. If that's what's going to help the economy, I will go do that. You know what I mean? I think that but there was a time in my life where I just accepted that I never own a home, and I just relegated my student loans as my house. Like, this is just my home payment. And that really does suck. But again, I'm still living a much better life than what my parents did or whatnot. So there's a lot of issue there. That I want to be very fair though, because I think some people will think that the only people that don't want this are Republicans. Republicans are the only people that don't want student loans to be forgiven. And I want to be very clear. I know a lot of Black older people and brown older people that have paid their loans off already and are not feeling that because they had to tighten their belt, buckle down, and they had to pay them off. And I respect that opinion. Like, I don't disrespect those folks. I understand what they were saying. But here's the thing, and I think there are a few things that are very different. I think the price of college has drastically changed. I think that it has the accessibility and what somebody needs to do in order to make those things happen. We're not talking about the numbers just doubling. We're talking about 5x, 10x in what is going up. And I think that the other thing is I don't think that loan companies play by the rules. I think that they have really stacked the deck in their favor. And for instance, like I've had to, go for bankruptcy before, and in large part due to college debt and student loans. And guess what? That bankruptcy, going in bankruptcy court, it gets rid of almost everything else except for student loans. And I think that there is a generation of people who are straddled down by this debt. I think that college is becoming just less appealing to a new generation of people, in large part due to this debt. And I also think that when you couple that with the kind of whatever renaissance colleges are going through at this moment, people are starting to shut their eye to it. And I think if the college industry wants to survive and wants to still be on the same level that it has been on for a while, I think this will be something that'll be really helpful. And nothing against Ukraine, but as a Black man who has been Black his whole life, and you as a brown man who's been brown his whole life, and there's never enough assistance for us, or things can't be done, and then to turn around and see us give $40 billion a few different times over to Ukraine for some stuff that wasn't necessarily our business. Like I am pro this country, but it's very hard to watch that and to swallow that while neighborhoods that I've grown up in, they said couldn't be, the blight was just going to be there. And now I'm in this Airbnb in this neighborhood that used to be all Black, and now I'm one of the only Black people that's actually here in this vicinity. Like, I've gone out, I have not seen another Black person in this famous West Oakland town off of Prescott.
In Oakland?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Listen, Omar. Oakland used to be
in
like
Oakland?
a Black city. Yes, it used to be.
Listen, I lived in San Francisco.
When I was a student, so because you're of that age.
I know definitively.
It used to have a thriving Black population. The Fillmore.
Yes, it did.
All that stuff. Go to the Fillmore today. And you see who's there. I promise you won't see many me's. So when we talk about the student loan piece, I'm very curious to hear people.
Who's there, man? Like the Monopoly guy with like top hats and stuff? Like the Monopoly guy just carrying around like sacks with like dollar bill sign on it, a top hat. Is that
people that got money,
where
man?
did we go?
People that got money, man. People that got money, man.
Wow.
And there's a lot of tech people. There's a lot of people from Silicon Valley. There's a lot of San Francisco money, and a lot of San Francisco money is coming over to Oakland because, even though Oakland is extremely expensive, it's still cheaper compared to San Francisco. So it is a quagmire. And I think that you do us no favors by straddling us down with this. So I don't want to come off like an easy writer. I also am somebody who has worked in those programs. All I have done is service jobs to the community, right? So social worker, education, you know what I mean? Like those, healthcare, those are all the type of jobs, the only type of jobs that I've done. And then I was supposed to do the loan forgiveness. And they had so many weird rules and wild things happening, man. Like it never has really processed for me. But I know somebody who has actually gone through that process and had their loans forgiven. So I would love, he's you. So I'm very curious to hear your story around loan forgiveness. Yes, and I'll be listening very intently. You're going to get the full screen because I have to understand how you did this.
Oh, geez. All right, man. So shout out, Maritza. Great to hear from you from Philadelphia, to all our fans, to all our audience members. Man, it's really great to hear from you. Nicole, you paid off all your debts. I'd love for you to explain how you did that. But, the doc and I were talking earlier today, and as of January of this year, I had all of my loans forgiven. And that's about $110,000 of debt that I've been straddling since, I was 22 years old, consistently making payments and so forth. I got to tell you, I was looking at that debt, Charles, and, they do the breakdown on the direct loan page with the federal government, and I was looking at the principal and the interest. I had just gotten, I'm 42. I've been paying student loans since I was 22. I had just gotten the entirety of the interest paid off and was barely about to make principal payments. Principal payments on $100,000. I think I'd have been 60 and still paying student loans. And I got to tell you, it's incredible. So yeah, Nicole, I mean, absolutely amazing. One bill at a time. I was young and I made a very clerical mistake in that when I went to Stanford, I had almost a full ride. So we were literally paying, I think only like, quote, $5,000 was my debt. I was paying all that off in work study and a job. So I came out of undergrad almost completely debt free. I made an enormous error because I was a child, still at the time at age 22, in that I did a program called a co-term where you can get into a graduate school program at Stanford in your fourth year and then move it into a fifth year and get your master's. Well, I just thought my scholarships and my need-based scholarships and everything else was going to transition over. Somehow or another, didn't read the fine ink. None of it did. So boom, $50,000 worth of debt. By the way, I got my master's in education from the Stanford Teacher Education School. So it was pretty clear that I was going to become a teacher. And like my first year salary was $32,000. So my first year salary was $20,000, essentially less than what debt I came out of. I then went to Harvard and got a master's in public policy. And I was lucky, I got a fellowship, which the entirety of my tuition was paid off, but room and board was not. Therefore, $25,000 a year, student loans in order to get that, another $50,000, right? So to answer your question, what wound up happening was that I was now an adult when I graduated from Harvard. I was, 30 years old. Again, like I was talking about earlier, I'd gone through that 25-year cycle of brain growth, got to be an adult. I was 30 and worked with a admissions counselor and a financial aid officer for weeks, being like, I definitively need to figure out what this is and how I can pay this off. Now, Obama got elected when I was in grad school. So the public service loan forgiveness program had just rolled out. But what Doc was saying was that I didn't know back at Stanford that there was several different categories that you could repay your loan in. So there's like income-based repayment. There is subsidized payment. There's like graduated payments. I mean, literally the list goes on and on and on. There's like, several different options, at least 7 or 8. However, in order to qualify for the public service loan forgiveness grant, you had to be in the income-based repayment model. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't, all of those payments did not qualify for the 10 years of public service loan forgiveness. So in order to qualify for the public service loan, you have to send documentation yearly, which was what I was doing. Year in, year out, I was not only sending my income, but I was sending the paperwork to requalify for the income-based repayment program. That was after I applied to the public service loan forgiveness. So I had to apply to that program. Then I had to convert all of my loans. And then in that conversion, I had to consistently send documentation year in, year out to prove that I was working for a public entity, in this case, the El Paso Leadership Academy, the 501c3 charter school that I founded. But I was also a teacher. What I realized is that none of my time as a teacher, from the time that I was 22 to the time I was 27, 28, none of those payments qualified under the public service loan forgiveness program. So it started essentially from scratch when I graduated from grad school and started working in nonprofits. Then it was like those things ticked up. And it's not about 10 years, it's about 120 qualifying payments. So you have to make 120 qualifying payments. Now that's 120 months. There it is. There's your 10 years. So what wound up happening was that I needed literally rocket science to figure out the exact loans I needed to get into, the exact application I needed to send, the myriad pieces of paperwork that I eventually needed to get in. And by the way, it got easier as like technology started speeding up to where literally like it just became a few minutes on the computer. But what started out was not a few minutes on the computer. It was several hours in configuration and document sending and then getting it in. And then it was getting sent to like God knows who, because those loans kept spinning from organization to organization. By the way, Doc, that's after I had to figure out that I had to go through loan consolidation because my damn loans were with a company that didn't qualify for the public service loan forgiveness program. So it was like I empathize with you immensely because the process that I went through was like Hubert, the video game. I was hopping from box to box to box, avoiding all these snakes and all these things trying to jump me off the cliff. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to get eaten by the snake. And it was that complicated of a chess game and a puzzle. So finally, I locked it all down. I had made a ton of payments as a result of being in this job. And I was like, okay, I've got about like maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years left, maybe about 18 qualifying payments until this sucker's forgiven. And then in January, I received this note that was like, hey, we looked at all your public service from the back. Our bad. You were a teacher for 6 years and you worked at all these nonprofits. Yeah, you're good. So I literally have the letter like printed, framed, I like on gold leaf painting, configured, carbon paper, scanned and printed. I literally have 24 different copies just in case something goes wrong. And I have proof of this. But since January of this year, I've had about $110,000 of student loan forgiven. So it's a relatively new thing, but the juggernaut of complexity to get through it, Charles, was so difficult that this is why I'm so emphatic about loan forgiveness, because it's not just like, I think that the conservative folks and even the Black people that you were talking about, a ton of Mexicans, by the way, being like, hey, you went to school, bro. Hey, you paid for that, bro. You took a loan. And I was like, hey, listen, Easy Rider, I get it. But you went to school in 1972. Tuition was $4 a credit. You got to bartend and pay the entirety of your college off because your tuition was $200 a year. My tuition at Stanford was $45,000 a year. Harvard's was $50,000. I was lucky that I got a full ride. So I get it that you are telling me to get a job and pay it off. Cool, I did in the public service area. So really what I'm emphatic about is not just the loan forgiveness, which I'm emphatic about because I still don't think that these 18-year-olds really got, knew what they were getting themselves into. And the circumstances of their parents were so radically different than theirs that it was extraordinarily difficult to understand at the time what you were getting into. But hindsight's 2020, and it's very easy for all these other people who knew what you got into. It's like, no. Had you been our age, you would know what you got yourself into.
It's crazy. And that's and it's just crazy. And again, the rules are so let me get this straight. You can be 18 and you can take out these loans and sign for this stuff, but you can't drink, can't have a glass of whiskey. Got it. Just want to make sure what we're on. And listen, man, you know what? I need more whiskey for this conversation. They You know what else happened though? There was this thing called reparations that they keep playing around that we never got. You know what? I'm taking my reparations. You ain't never getting this damn money. I will be in forbearance. I will be in struggling. You promised my people 40 acres and a mule, and you went back on your promise. So when I get that dang on 40 acres and the mule, you'll get your loans. How about that? Listen, man. I paid. I still pay, and there's so many different payments. They cut my loans up into different places. Is Sally over here? Correct. Is this over here? Is that over there? It is such a quagmire. It is so crazy. And I've watched banks get bailed out. I've watched other countries get bailed out. I've watched so many people that the government has sympathy on, and not necessarily. And listen, people can feel how they want to feel, and I respect my elders that have differences of opinions on this. I respect where you're coming from. I respect if you saved up and you were able to pay that off. I respect it. I get it, man. But this thing is rigged. It is not going to make people. You cannot be successful in this system unless you are stupid rich.
I want to really point out a couple of contingencies, and I'd like for you to kind of chime in. So there's a lot of Latino kids, and I would assume perhaps in the African American community, the same thing, where it's like you graduated from high school, you get into college, then you find out that you're not ready for college level work. You got to take remedial courses.
I took those, yes.
So you get into your college, yeah, and you get into college and you got to take remedial courses, or you get into community college.
I took 6 of them. I took 6 of them.
Damn, man. And that's what we were talking about in previous shows, is that the standards for California high schools need to start meeting the minimum standards for the CSU system and the UC system. So what then happens? Did you have to pay for those remedial courses?
Yes. You pay for them, and they do not go towards credit to graduate. They go towards credit for you to be able to take college math or college language arts. And here's the kicker. I was an A student. I had 383 when I graduated, man. I had AP Englishes and AP math classes. And the standard at high school A is different from the standard at high school B. And that's what happens, right? It's like, how are you graduating at the top of your class, yet and still you have to do so? I went to a school that was on a quarter system. So my full year was 3 classes, and I had to do that both for math and for English language arts. And I wasn't ready.
This is in college or in high school?
College. This is in college. And I had to pay for that. So let me just be very clear with people. I didn't take 12 units in college. I took 20 units, 22 units, 24. You know what I'm saying? For the first 2 years, I don't think I was under 20 units, and I worked full time, and I did work study. So and my parents knew nothing about, and I had parents that were not financially aware. So I'm like, Mom, Dad, I need this information for FAFSA. And they like, I ain't giving the white people my information. I ain't giving the white. It's like, no, I need this. And I was going to go to school. So it's like, all right, well, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to take it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to just make it happen. You know what I'm saying? I got audited every single year I did it. And I still finished in 4 years. I finished in 4 years, even with the 6 extra classes. You know why? Because I never took this thing called summer break. I went straight through for the entire 4 years. The entire 4 years I did not have a quarter off. I went to school the entire time to finish on time. I didn't finish one of my minors because I was like, no, I will not stay here any extra time. So, yeah, man, it's a wild game out here.
And I want to comment. Nicole made a couple of comments. Like, this one is she had stated it absolutely. So I want to not only honor Charles, but what I want to say is what happens in the psychology of so many of our students is that they get into these remedial courses. They weren't given the adequate preparation in high school, nor were they given kind of the adequate direction in high school to be like, hey man, this is how like a passion of yours leads to a career, leads to a major. So you've got some direction when you're going to college. It's directionless. You go to a large state school, no one gives a rat's behind about your existence. UT Austin has upwards of 60,000 kids in their system. Do you think that they're going to be able to sit down with you and guide you and counsel you? Stanford, despite the fact that it's extraordinarily small in its undergrad system, we're talking only about 5,000 to 7,000 kids in the undergrad at Stanford. I don't know if people know that. It's exceptionally small. Right. It's also exceptionally DIY. It's like, okay, hey kid, you're smart enough to get in here, figure it out. So what happens, you get to these systems and there's no one really helping and guiding you and saying, this is a course pattern that I think really matches your personality. So you're taking these remedial courses, you're taking all these other courses. It's not something you're passionate about. And then you're wondering, why the hell am I here? So then what happens is that you bail and you're left and straddled with an inordinate amount of debt because you were taking on these loans and it wasn't what was sold to you. So yeah, it is exceptional that Charles came into that system, was extraordinarily determined. It's exactly why he's so successful today. It's why he's a doctor, ladies and gentlemen. This man will not give up. This man will. He can't stop. He won't stop. He was doing it before Puff Daddy, P. Diddy. I don't know what his moniker is these days anymore. Sean Puffy Combs.
Love or something like that. I think he calls himself Love now. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, but that's what you got to do, bro. Like the fact that you have to. I mean, listen, man. You have to what I came from, I was never going back to. I wasn't gonna sell dope. I'm not built that way. I was not going back to shelters. Like, and I believed a lot. Like, I need college or I'm gonna die because I'm not built for this. And you want to know something else? Let me tell you what else I did as a result of that. Because of all this promise and stuff like that, I only took nonprofit, public serving, public facing jobs. I only worked as social worker. I only worked in education. I only did stuff in healthcare. I only did things that gave back to my community. So I have helped graduate hundreds and I think thousands at this point of Black kids, many of them with no debt of their own because, hey, they now have somebody to help them kind of look at this stuff and understand it better or whatnot. But I think that it just sucks, man. And I know Biden is very strong on this, and I actually don't think he's going to do it. He may, and if he does do anything around cancellation, it's probably going to be around 10,000, 15,000. Because I think that he is actually really a moderate, and I think that banks have a lot of control over both Democrats and Republicans, and I think that I would like to actually see some of those banks lobby for it. Let me tell you why, though. Because here's what happens if banks lobby for it. If banks lobby for forgiveness, they get paid off. So it's like, go ahead and lobby for it. There's a reason so many people end up buying your debt. Like, that's the other thing. I've never seen debt sold so much. I get letters or emails like, hey, so Navient is no longer holds your loan. These people, I'm like, who the hell is these people? I just got used to the Navient people. Like, and I think what happened was, I think organizations like Navient were banking on, let me buy up all this debt because the way the tide is turning, it looks like there's going to be a buyout. That's why I don't think it's ever going to happen, because I think that Navient saw something or heard something and they were like, oh, they're not going to ever buy this shit from us. Like, let's get rid of this. And they did, and they offloaded it. And now there's another company, you know what I'm saying? There's another sucker there. So listen, I don't know what's going to happen. I do think that if we were able to do this, it would kind of reinvigorate. There is a Democratic base that I think that would get a lot of energy. Hell, I'm not that keen on Biden. I don't love Biden. I don't think Biden knows whether it's daytime or nighttime, if I'm being really honest with you. I'm really worried for him when he speaks on certain things. I think he's a nice guy. I just think that he is I just think he's a senior citizen, and we need to like show him some senior citizen respect. But that don't mean you should be the president at this point. But I still prefer him over Trump. It's really weird. We had really, really poor options this time for president. Yeah, man. But if Biden was to get rid of some damn debt, though, if all of my debt went to zero, watch me campaign. Watch me campaign. Do you understand? I have my stump speech ready, son. I would be out there hitting the pavement. What are we doing? I would have you on midterm, but because you didn't do it, it's about to be a Democratic bloodbath during the midterm elections. It's crazy. We can close out early tonight because it's Friday, and now I'm frustrated and mad that I got all this debt that I'm saddled with. Well, but guess what? I'm switching that shit off. I'm not doing it. Go ahead.
I want to put a little silver lining on this because I'm with you. Before we even get into silver lining, I do want to state the irony in that Trump University is one of these like ludicrously predatory universities. And this is another reason that like loan should be forgiven, because a lot of these kids, again, are 18 years old. They're looking for like these viable online solutions. They're working jobs that can get this degree online, and then they get suckered into Trump University. That's not an accredited university. They're taking a ton of change from them, and then ultimately it dissolves because it's a ludicrously illegal and fraudulent organization with absolutely zero accreditation. However, the money that they owe is still real in student loans. So what I'm getting at, ladies and gentlemen, is that like I am absolutely all for paying debts. As you know, Game of Thrones said, a Lannister pays his debts. However, when the debts are created, oftentimes under extraordinarily different circumstances where parties are not really being as transparent as they should, dealing with 18-year-olds that clearly like don't have, I would say, a sense of understanding about what they're getting into, and parents that don't have the sense of understanding because the baby boomer parents went through radically different circumstances. What we need are new solutions. So I will tell you that if Biden forgives loans, just like you, I will be like storming the streets to be like, man, it's a brand new day. Can you imagine what it feels like no having college debt? However, what I would champion is a long-term solution, because I'm looking at my niece, Alea Hanshu, I love her to death. She's 11. She's thinking about going to Columbia. By the time she gets to Columbia, it's going to be $95,000 a year to go. So my sister and my brother-in-law are going to straddle themselves $400,000 of debt, or straddle her with $400,000 of debt, because ain't nobody got time for $400,000 worth of debt, man. Like, they do well, but not that well. And I don't know anyone other than millionaires who's able to just be like, yeah, absolutely no problem. Do I have $100,000 of expendable income every single year? So what I think colleges need to do is rethink their situation. A lot of the Ivy Leagues are saying if you're falling under this income bracket, you get a free ride. That's cool. I'm all for it, because a lot of my low-income students are going to benefit from that. But the problem is, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you're under this bracket, which is ludicrously low, and you're over this bracket, you're a millionaire, great, you can afford college. Traditionally, the people that went to college are the people in the middle, and colleges have made absolutely no inroads as to how this middle class is going to afford to go to college if they so choose, even a state school. So the Democratic Party, if you're listening to me, this idea has been pitched, and I guarantee you it's a very good idea. Why don't you just redo the GI Bill, except for like programs like AmeriCorps? You graduate high school. I would say you go straight into AmeriCorps or some domestic program where you give, much like the Israelis, much like a bunch of other folks, 2 years of public service to the United States. Rebuild our roads, man. Shit, I'd be like, I'm 18, I shouldn't be rebuilding a road. Then I get out there and I'm like, oh man, now I appreciate this place and a good job and the ability to get an education significantly more. And now I'm much more motivated to go to college, because I'm like, man, building a road is not an easy endeavor. 2 years of that, and then you can get to go to college, do your college thing, and then qualify for essentially loan forgiveness, or do another 2 years on that other side and have your loan completely wiped out. I think the federal government could in fact subsidize a program, and how they did it with the New Deal. Right. The difference with this is just simply saying, do it on the front end, do it on the back end, give 2 to 4 years to your country, and you will be forgiven this allotment of loans, if not the entirety of it, so that we can not only repair America, but educate America as well. And that's kind of my final statement. I do want to kind of end a little bit early. I've got a speech.
Oh, no, we both have a talk to go give. I have to go leave and give a talk too. So we both have to leave and go give talks,
good.
Because we work.
So that's my closing statement right there.
I think that was a great closing statement. I think you dropped the mic, and I would just say I don't need to add anything onto that. I would say, so for Omar, I am Dr. Charles Cole III. This has been another episode of the South Star Classroom. We will see you all next week, same bad time, same bad station. And Omar will be out, but have safe travels, brother. We will miss you. And the hair, you will come back, and the hair will just be blacker, B. Enjoy.
Just give me blacker, man. It's always blacker, man. Peace out, everybody.
Have a good one. Peace out.
I love it, dude. Every show, you're a real doctor in my hair. It's becoming so awesome. I consistently want to do it. Oh.